Just got started with our questions without answers series, talking about race. So there was a couple questions. One that was texted in, one that you received out in the lobby, right? So what was that question about? Just sort of maybe hostile?
It was just basically like intentionally engaging. And the answer was, okay, I'm gonna create margin for other people's faults, but what happens when they don't create margin for mine?
I just want to slap you.
And it ends up being a little hostile. And I just basically said, you know what? Even when somebody responds in a hostility to you making an effort, I mean, not pack yourself on the back kind of thing, but just like, I mean, just give them even more grace. Right. Because it may take more time. Like they may not be coming from the same situation you are. That when somebody says, man, I don't want to, you don't know anything, and it ends up being a very hostile thing. Just pray for them. Pray that the next conversation will be better. I mean, I don't fully know how to deal with that. Yeah. I haven't had too many of those personal experiences. But I can tell you this, next week we're talking about LGBTQ. Yep. I have had the personal experiences on that end with hostility, and I don't know if I can compare the two, but I mean, in my opinion, again, I'm holding to a truth that's not mine. Yep. I want to learn his ways and his truth, and the reality is sometimes I just have to sit there and give extra measures of grace to someone who is really arguing with me, but they're not really arguing with me. Does that make sense?
Right.
They're not really arguing with me. They're hostile in their heart towards any truth that would consider them wrong. And
right. There's no conversation to be had in some of those situations.
So at that point, it's just like I want to show them I love them. I want to show them that I care, and that's all I can do. So right. That, and maybe in that same situation, in a racial conversation, that could be applied. So that's all I have.
Yeah, I think what you were saying earlier about like your intentional silences when be slow to speak, quick to listen.
Oh gosh,
those type of situations. I think in a lot of ways, when hostility comes, that's when that silence plays a big part in what we need to do. Yeah. On the flip side, and I know when we talked about race in the path for our youth group, we had a couple of black people come up and just say, hey, thank you. Yeah. About time, that somebody talked about this. So I think
somebody talk about this.
I know. So yeah, it's just sort of addressing the tension.
Yeah,
and I think it sort of plays into the second question that we got. So, how has empathy? This was texted. How has empathy for different cultures and social groups start with the church and then become the pillar and strength of non-believers and the sword they use against like organized religion? So. I think the essence of that question is why does it we preach it and we teach it at church, but everybody else does it and we don't?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you my best guess at that because I don't really know the answer, but I'll give you my best guess. I think one of the reasons we preach and teach it is because we believe it's the truth, but we also believe that because we stand with truth, that we're never wrong. And so the fact that we stand with truth and that we're never wrong means that we sort of have an arrogance about us that overshadows the empathy that we're taught to feel. Yeah. And when people kind of like, well, no, we're standing on truth will win out and truth will win the day and truth will, I'm like, that's great. Yep. But I mean, even Jesus, that whole Peter scripture of like, he came, he checked in his Godhead to become man, to come in humility. If anybody could have stood on the earth and went wrong, if anybody could have done that, it was him, and he chose not to do that. Yeah. And I look at it and go, look, if Jesus himself, although he was truth, did not simply, live in the arrogance of his truth, but through empathy and compassion, cared for those without. That's where I believe sometimes we miss it. Yeah. And I think sometimes the church is struggling to live in empathy because we don't understand. We have a hard time dividing that.
Agreed. So. Yeah. Do you think that maybe it's this culture where we're afraid to offend, so we don't?
Oh, we are.
We don't address it.
Absolutely.
We don't open up and just have these conversations and call a spade and just say, hey, this is awkward. This is I don't know.
Yeah. I think again, even the conversation for next week, almost more so, because I think people are afraid to offend. And so because in their mind, they're thinking, well, I'm arguing my truth. Yep. And they're right. I'm like, no, that's not my truth. If I wrote it down, it wouldn't be the same way. I'd have multiple wives or something. Exactly. If I wrote what truth was and the rules were, rules would be great. But I think ultimately for me, I think that, like you said, there is a fear-based response don't want to offend, don't want to, and so we take a route that instead of addressing it and living in the truth of what God's called us to, and just saying, look, this is a truth that this is God's truth. I struggle with a lot of God's truth.
Yep.
So the fact that you're struggling,
That's great.
Yeah. And so I think that's where we can bypass the offense. I mean, I'm very rarely offended when somebody gets upset with me because of something that God said. As long as I feel like I was trying to deliver that in love or trying to not be, confrontive or whatever the case is, I try to not take offense to it because they're not really upset with me.
I didn't write it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's going to be interesting next week especially. So.
Definitely. Yeah. So so come back next week. We're going to be talking about LGBTQ community, all of that,
HB2
and the tension that comes
and all
with
that with Charlotte.
And then week after we're talking politics. Week before the election.
Yes.
So it's a
man.
heavy series, but
I can't
it's
even
good
imagine.
stuff.
Yeah.
It's exciting stuff. So come on back. Thanks again, Matt, for kicking us off.
Thanks, guys.
It was great.
Appreciate it.